Nobody wanted to take care of the rich and grumpy old man until a simple caregiver changed everything. Walter Thompson threw the last suitcase out the apartment door with all the strength his 72 years allowed. The fifth caregiver that week ran down the hallway clutching her belongings, while he yelled that he didn't need a babysitter. "And don't come back here with these opportunists," he shouted, before slamming the door with a bang. The home care agency had made it clear on the phone call that morning they wouldn't send anyone else. Walter was known throughout New York City as the impossible client, the millionaire widower who treated every professional like an enemy. But he didn't care. He preferred to be alone in his penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side than to put up with strangers messing with his things. 3 hours later, when he thought he would finally have peace, the doorbell rang. Walter opened the door ready to yell at whoever it was, but he found himself facing a brunette woman, around 40 years old, with curly hair, tied in a simple ponytail, wearing a beige uniform that was already somewhat faded. "You're Mr. Thompson, right?" she asked with a timid smile. "I heard from Mrs. Martin on the ground floor that you might need someone to take care of you." "I don't need anything, and certainly not you," he replied sharply, already starting to close the door. But the woman simply sat down on the hallway floor, leaning her back against the wall. "That's fine. I'll stay here until you change your mind." Walter was speechless. In 40 years of business, he had never met anyone as stubborn as himself. "Are you crazy? I'll call security right now." "Go ahead. I'm not doing anything wrong." She took an old book out of her bag. "I brought something to read. I can wait as long as necessary." Curiosity overcame anger. Against all his instincts, Walter left the door ajar and went back to the living room, but he kept peeking through the keyhole. The woman was indeed reading, completely calm. After 2 hours, he couldn't take it anymore. "All right, you can come in, but only for 5 minutes so I can explain why I don't need anyone." She stood up, put the book away, and entered without showing surprise or victory. Her eyes quickly scanned the room. The closed curtains, the table full of old newspapers, the dirty dishes piled in the kitchen sink, the musty smell hanging in the air. "My name is Carol Simmons. I've been working caring for people for 15 years. And I'm Walter Thompson, and I've dismissed 5 of your colleagues this week. All of them wanted to mess with my things, treat me like a child, keep talking about my life. I understand." Carol sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping a respectful distance. "You must have your reasons. Everyone does." Walter expected arguments, insistence, empty promises. The simplicity of the answer disarmed him momentarily. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "Chachi, exactly, I have my reasons and I don't need to explain them to anyone." He crossed his arms, becoming defensive again. "Of course not." Carol looked at the wilted plants on the balcony. "Can I give them some water? They must be thirsty." "Why do you care about the plants?" "Because they didn't ask to die of thirst. Just like you didn't ask to be alone, I imagine." The observation hit a sensitive nerve. Walter felt his throat tighten, but he covered it with irritation. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right." Carol stood up. "But I do know it's been 3 days since you've taken your blood pressure medication. They're right there on the table, still in the pharmacy packaging." Walter looked to where she was pointing. Indeed, he had completely forgotten about the medication prescribed by his cardiologist. "How do you know that's for blood pressure?" "I've taken care of many people with the same problem." She headed to the kitchen. "Can I make some coffee?" "You must be hungry too. I don't see any sign that you cooked today." "I don't allow anyone to touch my kitchen." "Understood. Then I'll make it at my house and bring it ready. I live very close by on Park Avenue." Walter Thompson was disconcerted again. All the other caregivers had insisted, argued, tried to push their luck. Carol simply accepted his limits without question. "Why do you want to work here? The agency must have told you I'm difficult." "They said you kicked out 5 people in 1 week." Carol smiled. "But they didn't say why. There must be a good reason." "There is." Walter felt a strange mix of relief and frustration. "They wanted to boss me around, decide what I should eat, when I should sleep, what clothes to wear, as if I were incapable." You are not incapable. The reply came firm, without hesitation. You just need someone who respects that. For the first time in months, Walter felt truly heard, but his distrust still spoke louder. And what's your game? You want me to trust you so you can rob me later, or do you want me to change my will? Carol laughed, a genuine sound that echoed through the quiet room. Mr. Thompson, if I wanted to rob someone, I'd pick a house that's easier to break into. And if I wanted an inheritance, I'd look for a nicer old man. In spite of himself, Walter almost smiled. Almost. All right, you can come tomorrow. But there are rules. Don't touch my personal things. Don't go asking questions about my life. Don't try to make me take medicine like I'm a child. And most importantly, don't try to be my friend. I pay, you work, that's it. Deal. Carol extended her hand. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 in the morning. Walter shook her hand quickly and walked her to the door. After she left, he stood still in the living room, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and relief. It had been a long time since he'd talked so much with someone. The next morning, Carol arrived promptly at 8, carrying an insulated bag. I brought breakfast, she said, placing the bag on the table. French bread, fresh cheese, lean ham, and freshly brewed coffee. If you don't want it, no problem. The aroma of fresh coffee made Walter's stomach growl. He hadn't had a decent coffee in weeks. You can leave it there, he murmured, trying to sound indifferent. Carol arranged the items on the table without fanfare, then went to the plants on the balcony. Walter watched her watering each one carefully, speaking softly to them as if they were old friends. Why do you talk to the plants? He asked, curious in spite of himself. Because they listen without judging. Carol wiped the leaves of a fern. And because when you take care of something alive, it reminds you that you're alive too. The answer touched a wound that Walter preferred to keep closed. He bit into the bread harder than necessary. Cheap philosophy. Maybe. Carol didn't seem offended. But it works. The first days passed in a careful dance of boundaries and respect. Carol arrived early, prepared the meals, took care of basic cleaning and the plants, and left in the late afternoon without insisting on conversation. Walter pretended to ignore her, but he started eating the food she prepared and secretly looked forward to her morning arrival. On Thursday, Carol found Walter standing before a framed photo on the living room shelf. The picture showed a younger man hugging an elegant woman, both smiling on a beach. She was beautiful, Carol commented softly. Walter stiffened, but didn't move away from the photo. She was my wife. Helen! How long were you married? 43 years. His voice came out weaker than usual. She passed away 3 years ago. Carol nodded with understanding. You must miss her a lot. I do? Walter touched the glass of the frame. That's why I don't want anyone here messing with her things, understand? Every object in this house has a story. Of course I understand. Carol approached carefully. I lost my parents the same year, one after the other. I know what it's like to be suddenly alone. Walter looked at her sideways, seeing something familiar in the sadness that passed through her eyes. Is that why you care for the elderly? That's part of it. Carol lightly touched a small orchid on the table. When they passed, I realized I had learned a lot from taking care of them, and that other families needed that help. Do you have children? I couldn't have any. The answer came without self-pity, just as a fact. But I care for many people who could have been my parents. Walter felt a tightness in his chest. Helen had always wanted children, but they never came. Maybe that's why she dedicated herself so much to her nieces and nephews and to charity work. Helen couldn't have children either, he said, surprising himself with the confidence. You must have taken very good care of each other then. We did. Walter looked back at the photo. She always said that a true love doesn't need children to be complete, that we were already a family. She was right. Carol smiled kindly. And I'm sure she wouldn't like to see you suffering alone. The observation hit home. Walter stepped away from the photo, becoming defensive again. Helen isn't here to give her opinion, and I'm not suffering, just living as I've chosen. Of course. Carol didn't insist, but Walter noticed a look of understanding that both bothered and comforted him at the same time. That night, for the first time in months, he didn't need to take medicine to sleep. The house didn't seem as silent as before. On Friday, Walter woke up to noise in the living room. He found Carol organizing a pile of mail that had been accumulating for weeks. "What are you doing?" he asked, irritated. "Separating the bills from the ads," she replied calmly. "Some of them are already overdue." "I didn't ask you to mess with that." "You're right, sorry." Carol stopped immediately. "I just thought it would be useful." Walter looked at the organized table. Indeed, there were important bills there that he had completely ignored. Okay, you can continue. But just this once." "Thank you." Carol went back to work. "Would you like me to also separate the phone numbers and addresses that came in the mail? There's a lot of stuff from banks and doctors." "No need." Walter hesitated. "I mean, if you want to, I won't stop you." It was the first time he had accepted help spontaneously. Carol smiled inwardly, but kept a neutral expression. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." The weekend passed quietly. Walter caught himself looking at the clock several times, waiting for Monday to arrive. When Carol returned, he felt a relief he preferred not to analyze. "How was your weekend?" she asked, organizing her thermal bag. "Normal." He lied. In truth, it had been long and lonely. "And yours?" "I visited my aunt in Queens. She's 82 and lives alone too. She gets worried when I don't show up." "Don't you have any other family? Just her?" Carol started preparing the coffee. "My parents were only children, so when they passed, it was just the two of us left." "And why don't you go live with her?" "Because she's independent and proud, just like you." Carol smiled. "She likes her own house, her own things, her own routine." Walter nodded in understanding. He would understand this aunt of Carol's perfectly. "But you visit her every week?" "Whenever I can. I bring food, check if everything's okay, we talk a bit, just like you do here." "Not exactly." Carol stopped stirring her coffee and looked directly at him. "With her, it's different. She welcomes me with open arms, tells me about her week, complains about the neighbors, asks about my life. With you, I work." The difference stung more than Walter expected. He realized Carol maintained exactly the boundaries he had set on the first day. "And you? Would you like things to be different here?" Carol thought for a moment before answering. "I wish you were less sad, but I respect your boundaries." "I'm not sad," he protested. "Sorry, I chose the wrong word." Carol went back to stirring her coffee. "You are lonely, which is different." "What's the difference?" "Lonely is a choice. Sad is a feeling. You chose to be alone, but you didn't choose to feel the longing." The observation was so accurate that Walter was left speechless. Helen always said he thought too much and felt too little, but Carol had identified the exact opposite. He felt too much and didn't know what to do with it. "Did you study psychology or something?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "No." Carol smiled. "I've just lived a lot and paid attention." That Tuesday, Walter received an unexpected call. It was Richard, his son, who lived in Miami and hadn't spoken to him in 2 years. "Dad, I heard you're having health problems." Richard's voice sounded full of fake concern. "Who told you that?" "Mrs. Martin from your building called me. She said you've been dismissing caregivers and living like a hermit." Walter looked at Carol, who pretended not to be listening while watering the plants. "I'm fine. And now I have someone here who helps me. Dad, you need to understand you can't live alone anymore. You're 72. So what? My mind works perfectly. But what if something happens? What if you fall or get sick?" Richard sighed dramatically. "I'm coming there next week. We need to talk about your future." Walter hung up the phone with a racing heart. He knew his son's tone all too well not to notice the ulterior motives. "Problems?" Carol asked discreetly. "My son is coming to visit next week." Walter sat down heavily on the sofa. "I bet he wants to put me in a nursing home." "And do you want that?" "Of course not. I want to die in my own home, surrounded by my things." "Then that's what's going to happen." Carol spoke with a confidence that surprised Walter. How can you be so sure? Because you're stubborn, independent, and you have the money to choose. She smiled. A tough combination to beat. For the first time in weeks, Walter laughed for real. You're right. I am stubborn. And thank goodness. Carol sat in the armchair across from him. If you weren't, I wouldn't be here. The week passed too quickly. Walter found himself getting nervous about his son's impending visit, but Carol remained calm and efficient. On Friday, she arrived earlier than usual. I brought some special things today, she said, carrying a larger bag. I thought it would be good for you to look presentable when your son arrives. What kind of things? That navy blue shirt of yours was a bit wrinkled. I took it to be ironed. And I brought some treats I made last night. Brigadeiros, beijinhos, some savory snacks. Why did you do that? Because I want your son to see that you're being well taken care of. Carol began arranging the sweets on nice platters. And because when we have visitors, it's good to have something tasty to offer. Walter was touched by the care. It had been years since anyone had bothered to make him look presentable for a visitor. Carol, thank you. You're welcome, Mr. Thompson. She smiled with genuine affection. You deserve to be treated with dignity. On Saturday morning, Richard arrived accompanied by an elegant woman who introduced herself as his new girlfriend, Pamela. Walter Thompson welcomed them into the living room, wearing an impeccably ironed blue shirt with the table set with Carol's treats. Wow, Dad, you look different. Richard seemed genuinely surprised. Different how? More well-groomed. The house is clean, you're well-dressed. Richard looked around. Where is this caregiver? She went shopping. She'll be back soon. Pamela tried a brigadeiro and smiled. It's delicious. Did you make it? No, Carol did. Carol? Richard questioned. That's the caregiver's name? Yes. Walter poured himself some coffee, noticing his son's suspicious expression. Dad, we need to talk about your situation. Richard leaned forward. You can't keep living alone, and we can't entrust your safety to just any stranger. Carol isn't just any stranger. She takes very good care of me. Dad, you barely know this woman. Richard's voice began to rise. How do you know she won't rob you or manipulate you? Because I'm not an idiot, Richard. I didn't say you're an idiot, but you are vulnerable. Richard exchanged a look with Pamela. That's why I brought some forms. We can sort everything out today. What forms? Richard took a folder from his bag and spread some papers on the table. Power of attorney for me to manage your finances, authorization for medical admission when necessary, and the registration form for an excellent retirement home in Greenwich. Walter's blood ran cold. You want to put me in a home? It's not a home, Dad. It's a safe place, with 24-hour medical care, activities for seniors. It's a prison. Walter stood up abruptly. I am not leaving my house. Dad, be reasonable. You're 72 years old. Your health isn't good. My health is great. Then why do you need a caregiver? Walter opened his mouth to answer, but realized he didn't have a good explanation. Or rather, he did, but it wasn't something he could explain to Richard. At that moment, Carol entered the apartment carrying shopping bags. She politely greeted Richard and Pamela, but Walter noticed the tension that had settled in the room. Carol, this is my son, Richard, and his girlfriend, Pamela. Nice to meet you, Carol smiled kindly. I'll put the groceries away and let you talk. Actually, we'd like to talk to you as well, Richard addressed her with a slightly aggressive tone. About the care for my father. Of course. Carol sat down calmly. What would you like to know? How long have you known my father? A few weeks. And how did you get this job? Through an agency? No. I heard from a neighbor that he needed help. Richard exchanged another meaningful look with Pamela. I see. And do you have references? Previous experience? I have 15 years of experience caring for seniors, Carol replied calmly. I can provide contacts if necessary. It will be necessary, Richard leaned forward. Because I'm worried about my father living alone with someone we don't know. Richard, Walter protested. Dad, it's natural for me to worry. Richard didn't take his eyes off Carol, especially considering you have considerable assets. The implicit accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Carol maintained a serene expression, but Walter felt his blood boil. "How dare you insinuate that—" "I'm not insinuating anything." Richard raised his hands. "I'm being cautious. Carol surely understands my position." "I understand perfectly." Carol stood up. "It's natural to worry about your father, but I can assure you he is being very well cared for." "For now," Pamela murmured. "What do you mean by that?" Walter turned to her. "Nothing serious," Pamela smiled falsely. "It's just that situations like this can evolve, and it's better to be safe than sorry." Carol excused herself and went to the kitchen. Walter followed her, leaving Richard and Pamela in the living room. "Sorry about that," he said, embarrassed. "No need to apologize," Carol continued, putting away the groceries. "They are worried about you." "They are worried about my money," Walter spoke bitterly. "Richard never cared about me while Helen was alive. Now he shows up talking about care and wants to lock me away in a retirement home. And what are you going to do?" "I don't know." Walter sat on the kitchen stool. "If I sign those papers, I lose my freedom. If I don't, he can claim I'm not fit to make my own decisions." "Are you fit?" "Of course I am." "Then that's what matters." Carol turned to him. "Mr. Thompson, you've built a whole life, made tough decisions, created a company. Do you really think an ambitious son is going to beat you?" Her confidence reassured him a little. "But he can make things difficult. He can, but you're not alone in this." "What do you mean?" "You have your lawyers, your doctor, your neighbors." Carol hesitated. "And you have me. You would help me?" "Of course." The answer came without hesitation. "It's my job to take care of you, and that includes protecting you from anyone who wants to harm you." Walter felt a strange and powerful emotion taking over his chest. It had been a long time since anyone had offered to protect him. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." "I know enough," Carol smiled. "I know you're a good person who's suffering, and I know you don't deserve to be treated as incapable." They returned to the living room where Richard was impatiently organizing the papers. "Dad, let's get this over with. Just sign here." "I'm not signing anything," Walter said firmly. "What do you mean you're not signing?" "You heard me. I don't need a power of attorney. I don't want to go to a retirement home, and I'm not letting you run my life." Richard looked at Carol angrily. "You said something to him, didn't you?" "I don't need to say anything," Carol replied calmly. "Your father is perfectly capable of making his own decisions." "This is manipulation," Pamela chimed in. "She's clearly turning you against your family." "My family?" Walter laughed bitterly. "You two show up here after 2 years bringing commitment papers, and you think you have the right to talk about family." "Dad, you're being irrational." "I'm being lucid." Walter stood up. "And now I want you to leave my house." "We're not leaving." Richard also stood up. "You need medical help. You're not thinking straight." "Mr. Richard," Carol intervened, her voice calm but firm. "Your father has asked you to leave. I think it's best you respect that. And who are you to tell me what to do?" Richard turned to her furiously. "You gold digger!" The insult echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Walter felt an anger he hadn't felt in years. "Get out of my house now, and don't ever come back." "Dad, now!" Walter pointed to the door. "And take that viper with you." Richard and Pamela left in a huff, but not before Richard yelled in the hallway that he would be back with lawyers. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. After the door closed, Walter let himself fall onto the sofa, shaking with anger and adrenaline. "Sorry you had to go through that," he said. "No need to apologize." Carol sat down beside him. "I understand." "He was never a good son." The words came out laden with pain. "He was always selfish, greedy. Helen tried to soften things, said he would change with time. Maybe he still will. He won't change." Walter shook his head. "He only came back because he thinks I'll leave an inheritance. He doesn't care about me, he never did." That must hurt a lot. It does. For the first time, Walter admitted the pain out loud. Helen always dreamed of being a grandmother. She imagined that Richard would get married, have children, that we would be a big, happy family. and instead he drifted away. Completely. After she died, he showed up at the funeral, helped with the paperwork, and disappeared. To this day. Carol fell silent for a moment, letting him process the emotions. "Mr. Thompson, can I ask a personal question?" "Go ahead." "Do you have any other relatives? Brothers, nephews, cousins?" "I have a niece, Isabella, my younger sister's daughter. She passed away 10 years ago. But she lives in Boston, has her own life. Do you two talk from time to time?" She calls on Christmas, on my birthday." Walter stopped. "Why are you asking?" "Because if Richard really comes back with lawyers, it would be good to have someone from the family on your side." The suggestion made sense. Isabella had always been affectionate with him and Helen, and she had a law degree. "Do you really think he will come back?" "I do," Carol said honestly. "People like him don't give up easily when there's money involved." "So, what should I do?" "First, call your niece, explain the situation. Second, schedule an appointment with your doctor to prove you're in good health. Third, talk to a lawyer about how to protect your assets." Walter was impressed by the practicality of the suggestions. "Have you been through this before?" "Not exactly this, but I've seen families fighting over inheritance while the parents were still alive." Carol sighed. "It's more common than it should be." "And how did it end?" "It depends. Sometimes the children win. Sometimes the parents manage to protect themselves." She looked directly at him. "But they only succeed when they have help." "Your help? Mine, lawyers, doctors, other relatives?" Carol stood up. "The important thing is not to be alone in this fight." On Monday, Walter called Isabella. The niece was shocked by the account of Richard's visit. "Uncle, that's terrible," she said. "He can't just have you committed against your will. He can, if it's proven I'm not capable of deciding for myself." "But you are. You're talking to me normally. You understand the situation." Isabella paused. "Uncle, can I come there this weekend? I want to meet this caregiver and assess the situation personally." "You would do that?" "Of course, your family. And if Richard is trying to take advantage—" "Thank you, Isabella. That means a lot to me." When he told Carol about the call, she smiled with satisfaction. "Great, now let's schedule that doctor's appointment." "You don't need to come with me." "Yes, I do," Carol said firmly. "If the doctor confirms you're well, the report is stronger if there's a witness present." On Tuesday, they went together to the office of Dr. Frederick Owen, the cardiologist who had been seeing Walter for 5 years. The doctor was surprised to see him with a companion. "Walter, how are you?" he greeted warmly. "And who is your companion?" "This is Carol, my caregiver." "Caregiver?" Dr. Frederick seemed confused. "Since when do you have a caregiver?" "It's a long story." Walter explained the situation briefly, including his son's attempt to have him committed. Dr. Frederick was outraged. "That's outrageous. Walter, you are in perfect mental condition. Your blood pressure is controlled, your routine tests are normal. There is no medical justification for involuntary commitment. Could you write an official report?" "Of course. I'll do it right now." The doctor turned to Carol. "And you, how is he at home? Does he eat properly, take his medication?" "Perfectly," Carol replied. "He's very independent, just needs some basic help with organization and reminders." "Excellent. Walter, you were lucky to find a competent caregiver." Dr. Frederick finished typing the report. Many seniors suffer with unprepared professionals. They left the doctor's office with the medical report in hand. Walter felt more confident, but still worried. What if Richard finds another doctor who says the opposite? Then it becomes a battle of reports, Carol said pragmatically. But Dr. Frederick has known you for years. That counts for a lot. On Thursday, the doorbell rang early. Walter opened the door expecting to see Carol, but found 2 men in suits. "Mr. Walter Thompson?" "Yes." "I'm Dr. Michael Lawrence, an attorney. This is my assistant, Dr. Paul. We're here at the request of your son, Richard Simmons." Walter's heart raced. "What do you want?" "We'd like to talk about your current situation. Your son is concerned about your ability to make important decisions." "My ability is just fine, thank you." Of course. Dr. Michael said with a fake smile. "But we need to document this officially. May I come in?" Walter was going to refuse, but realized it would be better to face the situation head-on. "You may come in." The lawyers settled in the living room, taking out papers and a recorder. "Mr. Thompson, we're going to ask some routine questions. What is today's date?" "Thursday, August 15th. "Correct. And what is your full address?" Walter answered all the basic questions correctly, growing increasingly irritated by the condescending tone. "Now about your financial situation," Dr. Michael leaned forward. "Are you aware of the value of your assets?" "I am." "And you know you have a caregiver living here?" "She doesn't live here, she works here." "I see, and how did you meet this Carol?" "She showed up offering help." "Showed up?" Dr. Paul wrote something down. "You didn't think it was strange for a stranger to show up at your door?" "I did. That's why I took my time hiring her." "But you ended up hiring her," Dr. Michael smiled. "And now she has access to your home, your finances." "She does not have access to my finances, but she has access to you." The lawyer made a dramatic pause. "Mr. Thompson, don't you think you might be being influenced?" "Influenced by whom?" "By this caregiver, against your own family." Walter stood up abruptly. "Enough! Get out of my house now!" "Mr. Thompson, we're only trying to help." "You're not trying to help anyone. You're here on my son's orders to have me declared incompetent." At that moment, Carol entered the apartment. She quickly assessed the situation and addressed the lawyers politely. "Good afternoon. Can I help you with something?" "You must be Carol." Dr. Michael stood up. "I'm the attorney for Mr. Thompson's son." "I see." Carol remained calm. "And what is the purpose of your visit?" "We are assessing Mr. Thompson's capacity to make independent decisions." "And have you reached any conclusion?" "We are still investigating." "Great," Carol smiled. "Then you'll also want to see the medical report that Dr. Frederick Owen prepared yesterday, stating that Mr. Thompson is in perfect mental and physical condition." The lawyer's expressions changed. "What report?" "This one." Carol took the document out of her bag. "Would you like a copy?" Dr. Michael read the report quickly, his confidence fading with each line. "Well, this is just one doctor's opinion." "The cardiologist who has been treating Mr. Thompson for 5 years, Carol added. "I imagine it carries more weight than the opinion of people who barely know the patient." "Ms. Carol, you seem very prepared for this situation," Dr. Paul observed suspiciously. "I've been a professional caregiver for 15 years, Carol replied calmly. "I've learned to protect my clients from people who want to take advantage of them." The implicit accusation did not go unnoticed. Dr. Michael put his papers away irritably. "Well, we'll analyze all of this and get back to you if necessary." "Feel free," Walter said with sarcasm. "But next time, make an appointment." After the lawyers left, Walter Thompson let himself fall onto the sofa, exhausted. "They're coming back, aren't they?" "Probably." Carol sat down beside him. "But now they know you're not alone in this fight." "Why are you doing this?" The question was heavy with emotion. "Why are you helping me against them?" Carol was silent for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "Because I've seen too many elderly people get robbed, manipulated, put away against their will by greedy children," she said finally. "And because you don't deserve that. But you barely know me." "I know enough." Carol smiled affectionately. "I know you're stubborn, proud, sometimes difficult, but I also know you're honest, fair, and that you loved your wife very much. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Walter Thompson felt his eyes well up. It had been so long since anyone had said a good word about him, since anyone had seen his qualities instead of just his flaws. "Carol, he began, but couldn't finish the sentence. "You don't have to say anything." She lightly touched his hand. "I know it's hard to trust after being alone for so long." "It is," Walter admitted. "After Helen died, I stopped trusting people. Everyone who showed up wanted something, money, favors, business deals. And now, he looked at her, now I'm afraid to trust and be disappointed again. Fear is normal. Carol said softly. "But you can't let it paralyze you forever." "How do you do it? Trust people." "I don't trust everyone," Carol laughed, "but I've learned to spot who's worth it." "And am I worth it?" "You've been testing me for weeks to find that out," she smiled. "What's your conclusion?" Walter thought about all the small kindnesses Carol had shown, the care for the plants, the food prepared with affection, the organized medicines, the ironed clothes, the defense against his son and the lawyers. "I think you are worth it." "Then we're even." The next day, Isabella arrived from Boston. She was a woman in her early 40s with short brown hair, practical clothes, and an intelligent gaze. She hugged her uncle with genuine affection. "How are you, Uncle Walter? I was worried after our conversation." "I'm fine, better than I've been in a long time." Isabella examined the apartment with a professional eye. "The place is impeccable, and you look well cared for." "That's Carol's doing." "Where is she?" "She went to the market. She'll be back soon." Isabella sat in the living room observing her uncle attentively. "Uncle, I need to be direct. When you told me about Richard, I was worried you were being taken advantage of by this caregiver." Walter stiffened. "Isabella, let me finish." She raised her hand. "But now, seeing the apartment, I realize I was wrong. You're well, lucid, cared for. Whoever this Carol is, she's doing an excellent job. She's a special person. She must be, to have won you over." Isabella smiled. "I remember how stubborn you were when I was a child. Aunt Helen always said you had a heart of gold, but it was hard to crack. Helen saw things in me that I didn't even see myself. And it seems Carol does too." At that moment, Carol arrived with the groceries. Isabella introduced herself, and the two women talked in the kitchen while putting the supplies away. Walter watched them discussing recipes and household care and felt a strange sense of family. "Uncle, can I speak with you alone?" Isabella asked after a while. They sat on the balcony while Carol prepared lunch. "What did you think of her?" "She's exactly what you need," Isabella said with conviction. "Competent, caring, but she doesn't treat you as helpless, and more importantly, genuinely concerned for your well-being." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Isabella leaned forward. "Uncle, in the time we talked, she asked me 6 questions about you. If you always liked plants, what Aunt Helen's favorite food was, if you take your medications correctly, if you have trouble sleeping, if you like music, and if you usually talk about the past." "And why is that important?" "Because she wants to understand you, not control you." Isabella smiled. "And because the questions were about your tastes and feelings, not about money or inheritance." "Did you talk to her about Richard?" "I did. She showed me the medical report, told me about the lawyer's visit, said you have the right to live as you wish as long as you're lucid." Isabella paused, and she said something that impressed me. "What?" "That your biggest fear isn't that Richard will manage to have you committed, but that you'll lose the will to fight, that you'll give up on yourself." The observation hit home. That was exactly what Walter had felt in recent years, a gradual loss of the will to carry on. "And is she right?" "I was," Walter admitted. "But now I have reasons to fight." "Great," Isabella smiled, "because I'm going to help you in this fight." On Sunday, before returning to Boston, Isabella had a long talk with Walter about legal strategies to protect his assets and his autonomy. "First, we're going to draw up a very specific power of attorney for me, only for medical emergency cases and with clear limitations. Will that stop Richard from getting his?" "It will make it very difficult," Isabella explained. "Second, I'm going to recommend a lawyer friend of mine here in New York City. He will prepare documents that prove your lucidity and your choices about the future." "And Carol? What about her?" "If anything happens to me, I want to make sure she is rewarded for the care she's given me." Isabella studied her uncle's face. "Uncle, are you falling in love with her?" The question caught Walter off guard. I don't know," he admitted. "It's different from what I felt for Helen. More peaceful, as if she were a part that was missing from my life." "And her? Does she feel anything for you? I don't know. Walter sighed. And I'm afraid to find out. If it's just a job for her. Uncle, nobody works the way she works just for money, Isabella said affectionately. And the way she looks at you, how she worries, that's not professional, it's personal. You think so? I'm sure. Isabella hugged her uncle. But be careful. Feelings in old age are even more precious than in youth. Monday arrived with an unpleasant surprise. Richard showed up at the apartment accompanied by 2 doctors and a court officer. Father, this is Dr. Robert Mitchell, geriatrician, and Dr. Amanda Cooper, psychiatrist. They've come to evaluate your mental capacity. I didn't request any evaluation, Walter protested. I did. Richard showed some papers. As your only son, I have the legal right to request a sanity examination when there are suspicions of incapacity. The court officer stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, I'm obliged to inform you that you must submit to the evaluation. It's a court order. Walter felt his world collapsing. Richard had obtained a court order without him knowing. Where is Carol? He asked, desperate. The caregiver cannot be present during the evaluation, Dr. Robert informed him. She could influence the answers. Then I'll call my niece Isabella. She's a lawyer. That is also not permitted, Dr. Amanda said coldly. The evaluation must be impartial. Walter felt completely alone and vulnerable. The doctors began asking questions, some simple, others more complex. He answered everything correctly, but noticed they insisted on specific aspects. Mr. Thompson, why did you hire a caregiver? Asked Dr. Robert. Because I needed help with some household tasks. But you have the financial means to hire a cleaning company. Why specifically a caregiver? The question was a trap. If he said he needed medical care, he would seem incapable. If he said he didn't need it, it would seem irrational to have hired Carol. Because she offered help at the right time, he replied, trying to be vague. And how did you meet this Carol? Dr. Amanda consulted her papers. She showed up offering services. Showed up? The 2 doctors exchanged glances. Didn't you find it suspicious for a stranger to show up offering care? I did. That's why I investigated before hiring. What kind of investigation did you do? Walter realized he hadn't done any real investigation. He had relied only on intuition. I talked to her, observed her work. But you didn't check references, criminal background, professional records. I didn't think it was necessary. The doctors wrote something down that was clearly not favorable. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Robert leaned forward, don't you think it was reckless to hire someone without checks? Perhaps, Walter admitted, feeling that each answer was sinking him deeper. And now this person has complete access to your home, routine, personal information. She doesn't have access to my finances, but she has access to you. Dr. Amanda wrote something down. Mr. Thompson, do you consider yourself an easily influenced person? No! Then why did you throw your son out the last time he came to visit you? Because he wanted to commit me against my will. And who told you the commitment would be against your will? Dr. Robert asked. Your son was trying to ensure you got proper medical care. Care that I don't need. According to whom? Dr. Amanda raised an eyebrow. According to the caregiver you hired without checks. Walter realized he was being manipulated, but didn't know how to escape the trap. According to my doctor, Dr. Frederick Owen. Ah, yes, this report. Dr. Robert examined the document. Interesting that you sought a medical report right after your son requested the evaluation. Who suggested that? I thought of it myself. On your own? Or did someone suggest it? Walter realized that, once again, it had been Carol who suggested getting the medical report. Someone suggested it, he admitted reluctantly. The caregiver? Yes. The doctors wrote something down that clearly reinforced the theory that he was being influenced. The evaluation continued for 2 hours. When it ended, Walter was exhausted and defeated. When will I know the result? In a few days. Dr. Robert put the papers away. The report will be sent directly to the judge. After everyone left, Walter was alone in the room, feeling completely lost. Carol arrived an hour later and found him still sitting in the same place, staring into space. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed. Walter told her about the evaluation. Carol listened in silence, her expression growing more and more worried. "They made me look like a senile old man who's being manipulated by you," he finished, his voice breaking. "Mr. Thompson, you are not senile, and you are not being manipulated." "But that's how it's going to look in the report." Walter looked at her with tear-filled eyes. "Carol, if they manage to have me declared incapacitated, I'll be committed, and you'll lose your job." "I'm not worried about myself." Carol sat down beside him. "I'm worried about you. Maybe it's better if you leave before that happens." The words came out painfully. "That way at least you protect yourself." "I'm not going anywhere," Carol said firmly. "Not while you need me." "But if they prove that you're influencing me, then we'll prove the opposite." Carol stood up, determined. "I'm going to call Isabella, and we'll find a way to reverse this." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we will fight this." She looked at him with a determination Walter hadn't seen before. "You gave up once before when your wife passed away. You're not going to give up again." "How do you know I gave up when Helen died?" "Because you stopped taking care of her plants, you closed the curtains, you stopped receiving visitors, you let the cleaning lady go." Carol listed. "All the things Helen loved you abandoned, as if you wanted to erase her memory." "I didn't want to erase it," Walter protested. "It hurt too much to remember." "I know that," Carol said softly. "But Helen wouldn't like to see you like this. She would want you to live, not just exist." "How can you know what Helen would want?" "Because she loved you." Carol smiled. "And those who truly love want the other's happiness, even after they're gone." The words hit Walter like a bolt of lightning. Helen really would want to see him happy, not locked away at home, alone and bitter. "You're right," he admitted. "Helen would hate to see me like this." "Then let's fight. For her and for you." That night, Isabella arrived from Boston unexpectedly. She had taken the first flight after hearing about the forced evaluation. "Uncle, this is absurd," she said, furious. "How did they get a court order without notifying you?" "Richard must have some convincing arguments," Walter sighed. "And now they have 2 hours of recording where I sound like an easily manipulated fool. Let's listen to this recording." Isabella pulled a digital recorder from her bag. "I brought a device to record our conversation too." "Why?" "Because we're going to do our own evaluation." She turned to Carol. "You can ask him questions about his routine, medical care, daily activities. I want to show how he really functions day to day." For an hour, Carol asked detailed questions about Walter's routine. He answered precisely about medications, schedules, appointments, finances, recent and old memories. It was clear his mind worked perfectly. "Excellent," Isabella smiled. "Now let's talk about decisions. Uncle, explain to me why you chose Carol as your caregiver." Walter explained the process, how she showed up, her patience waiting in the hallway, the respectful way she treated his boundaries, the competence she demonstrated over the weeks. "And why do you trust her?" "Because she never tried to control me." Walter looked at Carol. "All the other caregivers wanted to decide for me. Carol gives me options and lets me choose." "Can you give examples?" "When she suggested the medical report, she didn't say you have to do this. She said it would be good to have an official document. When she organized my correspondence, she asked for permission first. When my son showed up with the hospitalization papers, she defended me but made it clear the decision was mine." Isabella wrote everything down meticulously. "And what about your finances? Does Carol have access?" "None. Not to the statements, not to the passwords, not to the cards." Walter was categorical. "She doesn't even know how much money I have." "Is that true, Carol?" "Completely," Carol confirmed. "My job is to care for his health and well-being, not his business affairs." "And have you talked about inheritance, a will, anything like that?" "Never." They both answered simultaneously. Isabella smiled, satisfied. "Perfect. We have enough to challenge any report that declares incompetence." She turned to Carol. Now I need to talk about something delicate. Richard's doctors are going to try to prove you're a manipulative gold digger. We need information about your past, references, anything that proves your character. Carol visibly became uncomfortable. What kind of information? Where you worked before, references from other clients, your training. Carol hesitated. I can get that information, but it will take a few days. Why? Isabella asked gently but firmly. Because it's complicated. Carol sighed. My last employer passed away 6 months ago. I took care of her for 3 years, but the family became hostile after she was gone. Hostile how? They thought I had influenced her will. Carol spoke with difficulty. Mrs. Alberta left a small part of the inheritance to me as gratitude for the care. Her children contested it, accused me of manipulation. Walter and Isabella exchanged worried glances. And how did it end? Isabella asked. The will was upheld because everything was legal, but the children spread rumors that I was a gold digger. Carol looked at Walter with sadness. That's why it took me so long to find another job, and when I showed up here I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't trust me. Carol, Walter began. I know it sounds terrible, she interrupted. 2 elderly employers, 2 sets of children accusing me of the same thing, but I swear I never manipulated anyone. How much did Mrs. Alberta leave you? Isabella asked. $100,000, Carol replied softly. She said it was for me to buy a little house to start a new life. Isabella and Walter fell silent, processing the information. Carol, Isabella said carefully, you understand this will be used against you if Richard finds out? I understand. Carol stood up. That's why maybe it's better if I leave, before I cause Mr. Thompson even more trouble. No. Walter stood up too. You are not leaving. But, Mr. Thompson. Carol, do you think I care about $100,000? He walked over to her. I spend that much on restaurants in a year. What matters to me is whether you helped me for money or out of affection. It was out of affection, Carol replied with tearful eyes, from the very first day. Then that's what matters. Walter turned to Isabella. And as for Richard, let him find out. I'd rather people know the truth than keep hiding it as if it were something wrong. Isabella smiled proudly at her uncle. All right, then we'll work with the truth. Carol, I need the full details of the Mrs. Alberta case. Lawyers involved, documents, witnesses. What for? To prove you are a competent and honest caregiver who was unfairly slandered, Isabella explained. If we can get in touch with the lawyer who defended the will, he can vouch for your character. On Wednesday, the evaluation report arrived. As expected, the doctors concluded that Walter showed signs of external influence on decisions and possible impairment of judgment due to social isolation and emotional dependence on the caregiver. It's outrageous, Isabella was furious. They turned every sign of lucidity into proof of manipulation. And now? Walter asked, devastated. Now we fight. Isabella was already on the phone with lawyers. I have 48 hours to challenge this report before the hearing. The next 2 days were a whirlwind. Isabella managed to contact Dr. Howard Fletcher, the lawyer who had defended Mrs. Alberta's will. He not only confirmed Carol's honesty, but also provided a detailed letter of reference. Carol Simmons is one of the most upright people I have met in 40 years of practicing law, the letter said. Mrs. Alberta's children tried everything to invalidate the will, but they couldn't find a single shred of evidence of manipulation or coercion. Carol cared for Mrs. Alberta with exemplary dedication until her last day. Furthermore, Isabella obtained statements from neighbors in the building, the doorman, the pharmacist on the corner, all attesting to Walter's visible improvement since Carol started working. He started greeting people in the elevator again, said Mrs. Martin from the ground floor. Before he always had a scowl, now he even smiles. He started asking for the right plants for the balcony, confirmed the florist on the street. He only used to buy when his wife was still alive. He started coming to the pharmacy regularly again, always accompanied by the young woman, said the pharmacist. Before, he came irregularly, without an organized prescription. On Friday, the day before the hearing, Carol was visibly nervous. What if it doesn't work? She asked Walter. What if they manage to have you committed? They won't succeed. Walter spoke with a conviction he didn't feel. And even if they did, I want you to know that these have been the best months I've had since Helen passed away. Mr. Thompson, let me finish. He held her hands. You gave me back my will to live. You made me remember that I'm still a person, not just a grumpy old man waiting for my time to go. You've always been a person. Carol smiled affectionately. You just had a hurt heart. And you helped heal that hurt. Walter pulled her closer. Carol, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I've fallen in love with you. The words hung in the air like a fragile gift. Carol felt her heart race. I've fallen in love with you too, sir, she admitted softly. Ever since I saw you waiting in the hallway, stubborn as a mule, I knew you were a special man. Even though I'm an impossible grump? Especially because of that. Carol laughed. Anyone can be nice. Only real people are authentic, even when it bothers others. They kissed for the first time right there in the living room, surrounded by the plants she had saved and the furniture that told 40 years of love story. It was a gentle kiss, full of affection and promises. Helen would approve of you, Walter said when they separated. Are you sure? Absolutely, he smiled. She always said I needed someone who would stand up to me as an equal. You do that. And you make me feel valued. Carol touched his face. Not like an employee, but like an important person. You are the most important person in my life now. On Saturday, the hearing took place in a small room in the family court. Present were Walter, Carol, Isabella with her lawyer, Dr. Mark Patterson, Richard with Dr. Michael Lawrence, and the Judge John Carter Montgomery. Richard began by presenting the psychiatric report and arguing about the harmful influence of Carol on his father's life. Your Honor, my father is clearly being manipulated by this woman. She appeared out of nowhere, installed herself in his life, and now he refuses adequate medical care in favor of her whims. What whims? Asked the judge. He fired 5 professional caregivers to stay with her. He refuses to go to a nursing home where he would be properly monitored. And worse, he is romantically involved with the employee. How do you know that? It's obvious from their behavior. Richard pointed to Walter and Carol, who were sitting side by side. A 72-year-old man doesn't make rational decisions when he's in love. Dr. Mark stood up. Your Honor, what the petitioner calls manipulation, we call competent and caring assistance. We present evidence that Mr. Thompson has improved significantly since Mrs. Carroll began working. He presented the statements from the neighbors, the letter of reference from Dr. Howard Fletcher, and the report from Dr. Frederick Owen attesting to Walter's mental health. Furthermore, Dr. Mark continued, the fact that Mr. Thompson has developed feelings for the caregiver does not invalidate his decision-making capacity. On the contrary, it demonstrates that he is still capable of forming healthy emotional connections. And what about her history? Asked the judge. I understand there were similar issues in her previous job. Issues raised by self-interested children, Your Honor. Dr. Mark showed the documents from the previous case. The will was upheld because there was no evidence whatsoever of manipulation. Mrs. Carol was a victim of slander, not the perpetrator of manipulation. The judge turned to Walter. Mr. Thompson, would you like to speak? Walter stood up, leaning slightly on Carol's arm. Your Honor, I am 72 years old and have a lifetime of experience judging people. I built a company from scratch, created jobs, made decisions that affected hundreds of families. His voice was firm and clear. If with all that experience I cannot choose who takes care of me, then I don't know what a lifetime of learning is for. And what about the relationship with the caregiver? My wife died 3 years ago. Walter looked directly at the judge. I thought I would never feel anything for anyone again. Carol proved me wrong. She didn't manipulate me into falling in love, Your Honor. She simply treated me like a human being worthy of affection. And do you believe your decisions are free from influence and completely? Walter was categorical. It was, Carol gives me options, not orders. She helps me carry out my decisions. She doesn't make decisions for me. And most importantly, she respects me when I say no. The judge made some notes and turned to Carol. "Mrs. Simmons, what is your version of the facts?" Carol stood up, nervous but determined. "Your Honor, I showed up at Mr. Thompson's door because I heard he needed help. I found a lonely, sad man, but perfectly lucid. My job was to take care of his physical health. I ended up taking care of his emotional health too, without planning to." "And what about the romantic relationship?" "It happened naturally." Carol spoke honestly. Two adults living together, getting to know each other, developed mutual affection. I see nothing wrong with that. "Do you have a financial interest in Mr. Thompson?" "None." Carol was firm. "We never discussed inheritance wills, investments. My interest is purely emotional." The judge took a long pause, analyzing all the documents. "This is a delicate situation," he said finally. "We have a lucid elderly man who chose a caregiver, developed feelings for her, and is being challenged by his son." Richard shifted nervously in his chair. "After reviewing all the evidence," the judge continued, "I find no legal basis to declare Mr. Thompson incapacitated. The medical reports are contradictory, but recent history shows an improvement in his quality of life." "But, Your Honor," Richard tried to intervene. "As for the relationship with the caregiver," the judge interrupted him, "it is not for the judiciary to judge the romantic choices of capable adults. Mr. Thompson has the right to live as he wishes, with whomever he wishes." Walter felt his legs weaken with relief. "Therefore," concluded the judge, "I deny the request for guardianship. Mr. Thompson retains full legal capacity and freedom to make his own decisions." Richard left the hearing visibly irritated, promising to appeal the decision. But Walter, Carol, and Isabella left hugging, celebrating the victory. "You did it." Isabella was radiant. "Now you can live in peace." "Thank you for everything, Isabella." Walter hugged his niece. "I don't know how to thank you." "By being happy, Uncle," she smiled. "That's all I want." That night, Walter and Carol had dinner on the porch, among the plants that were now blooming luxuriantly. "What are we going to do now?" asked Carol. "Now we are going to live." Walter held her hand. "The way Helen would have wanted me to live." "What if Richard keeps bothering us? Then we will keep facing it. Together." Carol smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in years. "Mr. Thompson, can I ask you a question?" "You may. Do you still think I'm a gold digger?" Walter laughed heartily. "I do," he said, seeing her startled expression. "You took advantage of my broken heart to make me happy again. That's the biggest advantage anyone has ever taken of me." "You stubborn old man!" Carol gave his arm a playful slap. "You dear opportunist," he retorted, pulling her in for a kiss. 6 months later, Walter and Carol were married in a simple ceremony at the apartment, with Isabella and Carol's aunt as witnesses. Richard did not show up, but sent a laconic email wishing them happiness. 1 year after the hearing, Walter decided to create a social project, a training center for elderly caregivers in underprivileged communities. Carol became the coordinator, using her experience to train other professionals. "Why are you doing this?" asked Carol, watching him sign the checks for the project. "Because I learned that caring is not just a job," Walter explained. "It's a form of love. And I want other seniors to have the luck I had to find someone like you." The center was inaugurated on a sunny Saturday, with dozens of families in attendance. Walter gave an emotional speech about how a simple caregiver had transformed his life. 2 years ago, I was a bitter, lonely man, just waiting for the end," he said, holding Carol's hand. "Today I am a married, happy man with a purpose, all because someone had the patience to break through the hard shell I had built around my heart." The audience applauded emotionally. Among the crowd, several people discreetly wiped their eyes. "This center will train caregivers, yes," Walter continued. "But mainly, it will train people capable of looking beyond the grumpiness, the stubbornness, the apparent coldness of the elderly, because behind every cranky old person is a heart that can still love and be loved." After the ceremony, Walter and Carol walked through the center's garden, watching the first students chatting animatedly. "Do you think the project will work?" asked Carol. It will, Walter said with certainty, because it will teach the same thing you taught me, which was that everyone deserves a second chance to be happy. He stopped and kissed her gently. Even a stubborn old man of 72, especially a stubborn old man of 72, Carol corrected, smiling. They returned home in the late afternoon to the apartment that now always had its curtains open, flowering plants, and the aroma of home-cooked food. On the living room table next to the photo of Helen, there was a new photo, Walter and Carol on their wedding day, smiling with the happiness of those who discovered that love can blossom at any age. That night, while having dinner on the balcony, Carol asked, "Mr. Thompson, do you have any regrets?" "Just one," he answered. "What?" "Not letting you into my life sooner." Walter smiled. "But then, I remember you arrived exactly at the right time, as the right people always do." "How can you be sure I am the right person?" "Because you didn't try to change me," Walter explained. "You just helped me become who I always was inside, a man capable of loving and being happy." 2 years later, Richard showed up unexpectedly at the apartment. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, visibly worn down. "Dad, can we talk?" Walter, now 75, was stronger and healthier than when Richard had last seen him. Carol discreetly offered to leave, but Richard asked her to stay. "Actually, I want to talk to both of you," he said, visibly embarrassed. "What do you want, Richard?" "To apologize." The words came out with difficulty. "Dad, I was wrong about everything." Walter crossed his arms, keeping his guard up. "Wrong how?" "About Carol, about you, about what really matters in life." Richard sat down heavily. "I lost my job in Miami. Pamela left me when the money ran out. I'm living in a tiny apartment in New York City, surviving on temporary jobs. And I realized I wasted years of my life chasing money, ignoring family, treating people like objects." Richard looked at Carol. "Carol, I offended you terribly. I called you a gold digger, a manipulator. You didn't deserve that." "Thank you," Carol replied with dignity. "I accept your apology." "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I tried to have you committed, have you declared incompetent, separate you from someone who clearly is good for you." Richard sighed. "But if you give me a chance, I'd like to try to be a better son." Walter Thompson studied his son's face for a long moment. "Why now, Richard? Why only now do you want to be a better son?" "Because now I understand what it's like to be alone." The answer came filled with pain. "And I understand that family isn't about money or inheritance. It's about taking care of each other. And how do I know you won't change your mind when your situation improves?" "I don't know." Richard was honest. "I only know that I've learned that money doesn't warm the bed when you're alone. It doesn't talk to you when you need to vent. It doesn't hug you when you're scared." Carol lightly touched Walter Thompson's arm, not pressuring, just offering silent support. "Richard," Walter Thompson finally spoke, "you hurt my heart very much, and Carol's too." "I know. But you are my son, and if you truly want a chance, I won't deny you." Walter Thompson paused, "but with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you will respect my wife." Walter Thompson took Carol's hand. "Carol and I got married, and she is part of the family now." "Wife?" Richard seemed surprised but did not disapprove. "Congratulations, sincerely." "Second, no more talk about inheritance, wills, or money. If you're here for the family, then it's for the family. The rest doesn't matter. I agree. Third, you will work. I won't support an adult son. If you want to be part of my life, you need to have your own life. I'm already looking for a job. And fourth," Walter Thompson leaned forward, "if I ever need special care again, I'm the one who decides. Not you, not any doctor you bring. Me." "Understood." Walter Thompson looked at Carol, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "All right. You can have lunch with us on Sunday." "I can." "You can." Walter Thompson smiled for the first time in the conversation. "Carol makes a roast chicken that even you will approve of." Richard smiled too, a genuine smile that Walter Thompson hadn't seen in years. Thank you, Dad. I won't disappoint you. After Richard left, Carol sat next to Walter Thompson. Are you sure that was a good idea? No, Walter Thompson admitted, but Helen always said that family is family, even when they don't deserve it, and that everyone deserves a second chance. What if he's lying? Then we'll find out. Walter Thompson kissed her forehead. But I'd rather give a chance and be disappointed than not give one and regret it later. That's why I love you. Carol smiled. You're stubborn, but you have a generous heart. I learned from the best teacher. The first Sunday lunch was tense but cordial. Richard sincerely complimented Carol's cooking, asked about the social project, and shared his difficulties finding a job. Why don't you work at the Caregiver Center? Carol suggested. Me? Richard seemed surprised. I don't know anything about elderly care. But you know about administration, accounting, management, Walter Thompson pondered. The center needs someone to organize the administrative side. You would hire me? If you prove yourself competent and reliable, yes. Walter Thompson was direct. But it would be a job like any other, with hours, responsibilities, and a fair but not exorbitant salary. I accept. Richard started working at the center the following week. Initially, everyone watched him with distrust, but gradually he demonstrated competence and dedication. Most importantly, by spending time daily with the elderly and caregivers, he began to understand the nature of the work Carol did. Dad, he said one Sunday, I want to apologize to you again. Why? Because now I see what Carol does at the center, how she treats each senior with individual care, how she resolves conflicts, how she trains the caregivers. Richard shook his head. I accused you of being manipulated by an extraordinary person. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Carol is indeed extraordinary, Mr. Thompson agreed. But you are also changing, Richard. That counts for a lot. I'm trying to be the person Mom would have wanted me to be. She would be proud to see you now. 6 months later, Richard had settled in New York City with his own apartment and a stable life. He had also started dating Anna, one of the psychologists at the center, a relationship built on very different foundations than his previous ones. Anna is very different from Pamela, Carol commented to Mr. Thompson. How so? She likes Richard for who he is, not for what he has. Carol smiled. And more importantly, she sees his potential to be a better person. Just like you saw in me. Just like I saw in you. On the 3rd wedding anniversary of Mr. Thompson and Carol, they organized a party at the center. Present were Isabella with her husband and children, Richard with Anna, Carol's aunt, dozens of caregivers trained by the project, and seniors who had benefited from the work. During the party, Mr. Thompson asked to speak. 5 years ago, I was a broken man, he began. I had lost my wife, pushed my family away, given up on life. I lived locked away in an apartment, just waiting for the end. The audience listened in respectful silence. Today, at 76 years old, I am a married man surrounded by family with a purpose in life. Mr. Thompson looked at Carol with adoration. Everything changed because a stubborn woman sat in the hallway of my building and said she would wait until I changed my mind. Affectionate laughter echoed through the hall. This party isn't just to celebrate our marriage, it's to celebrate the transformation that love can make in anyone's life, at any age. Mr. Thompson extended his hand to Carol. And to say thank you to the woman who taught me that it's never too late to start over. Carol stood up and went to him, her eyes shining with emotion. You taught me a lot too, she said. You taught me that patience is always worth it, that behind every grumpiness there's a hurt heart waiting to be healed, and that true love has no age. They kissed under the warm applause of the entire audience. Later, when the party was winding down, Mr. Thompson and Carol sat in the center's garden, watching the last people chatting. Are you happy? Asked Carol. Completely, Mr. Thompson replied without hesitation. And you? More than I ever imagined possible. You know what makes me happiest? What? Seeing that our story has become an inspiration for others. Mr. Thompson pointed to an elderly couple talking animatedly near the fountain. Look at Mr. Anthony and Mrs. Mary. They met here at the center and are dating. And Julia got a permanent job with the Simmons family, Carol added. She said she learned from our example that caring with affection makes all the difference. It's good to know our craziness was good for something. Our craziness, Carol laughed. You think it was craziness. I think it was the sanest craziness of my life. Mr. Thompson pulled her closer. A 42-year-old woman falling in love with a stubborn old man of 72. A stubborn old man deciding to give love a chance after 70. If that's not craziness, it is craziness, Carol agreed. The best craziness in the world. They fell silent for a moment, watching the stars beginning to appear in the New York City sky. Carol, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret anything? Carol thought for a moment. I regret taking so long to knock on your door, she said finally. Why? Because we could have had more time together. Nonsense. Walter kissed her forehead. We had exactly the time we were meant to have, and we're going to have much more time yet. How can you be so sure? Because now I have reasons to live a long life. Walter smiled. I want to see the center grow. I want to see more happy seniors. I want to see Richard marry Anna. I want to meet the grandchildren they might give me. And what about me? Carol asked with fake indignation. Don't you want to see me getting old? I want to see you getting old by my side. Walter pulled her in for a kiss. I want us to be that cute couple that walks hand in hand in the park, even when I'm using a cane and your hair is completely white. Will you still love me even when I'm all wrinkly and grumpy? Especially when you're all wrinkly and grumpy. Walter laughed. Then we'll be even in the grumpiness department. You impossible old man. My dear opportunist. And so, between laughter and affection, they walked back home, to the apartment that was now always full of life, love, and purpose. The man that nobody wanted to care for had found someone who not only cared for him, but loved him exactly as he was, and the simple caregiver had discovered that sometimes the greatest treasure hides behind the toughest shell. 5 years later, Walter turned 80. The party was at the center, which had now become a national reference for caregiver training. Richard, now married to Anna and father of 2 young children, gave a moving speech about his father. When I was a child, I thought my father was perfect, he said. When I became an adult, I thought he was impossible. Today, at 45, I know he is simply human, a man who loves deeply, who makes mistakes, who learns, who forgives, and who taught me that it's never too late to be a better person. Walter, now wearing glasses and using an elegant cane, but still strong and sharp, listened to the speech with emotion. Thank you, son, he said, for giving me a second chance to be your father. Thank you for giving me a second chance to be your son. Carol, at 52, had become a reference in senior care, giving lectures across the country about the importance of affection in old age. She watched the reconciliation between father and son with deep satisfaction. That night, in the apartment that now had photos of 3 generations scattered around the living room, Walter and Carol sat on the balcony as they always did. Did you know that today marks exactly 5 years since you sat in my hallway? Asked Walter. I remember it like it was yesterday. Carol smiled. You were the grumpiest man I had ever seen. And you were the most stubborn woman I had ever met. A perfect match, then. Perfect, Walter agreed. Carol, thank you. For what? For having patience with me. For seeing past the grumpiness. For loving me when I didn't even love myself. Walter held her hand. For giving me the best years of my life. The best years are still to come, Carol said with conviction. How can you be so sure? Because every day I wake up by your side is better than the last. She kissed his wrinkled hands. And because we've learned that true love doesn't fade with age. It grows. I love you, Carol Simmons. I love you, Walter Thompson. And so at his 80 years and her 52, they continued to prove that love has no age, that happiness can begin at any moment, and that sometimes the best things in life arrive when we least expect them. Disguised as obstacles, we must have the courage to face. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story. Have you ever met someone who completely changed after finding love in their golden years? Do you believe everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, regardless of age? Leave your opinion in the comments and share your own experiences. If this story moved you, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other narratives that touch the heart.